Welcome to Talking Giants player profiles and projections brought to you by Captain Morgan. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, Justin Pennick, and this is the Isaiah episode. We're talking about Isaiah Hodgins and Isaiah Simmons, but we're going to start with Isaiah Hodgins. 6'4", 210 pounds. He's 25 years old, was a sixth rounder in 2020 out of Oregon State. Giants brought him back on a minimum contract after not tendering him as a restricted free agent. You know, we all know the story with Hodgins. The Bills waived him, and the Giants claimed him in November 2nd in 2022, and he immediately got playing time for that Giants team. And he was a godsend to that Giants because it gave them three wide receiver options that they could rely on. Was the starter last year, but eventually gave up his role to Jalen Hyatt, Justin. And now with the addition of Malik Neighbors, he's very clearly not one of the top four wide receivers on this team. But I hope that he does have a roster spot, despite the fact that he played 0 special team snaps last year.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bobby. And Isaiah Hodgins will always hold a place in Giants fans' hearts over what he did in 2022. And then I think kind of got overhyped heading into 2023. And now I think he's landed in terms of his roster spot. He's landed in a good spot where I think he belongs on an NFL roster. Maybe there are some teams where he's challenging to be that third wide receiver because the Giants do have a little bit of depth. But for that exact reason, because the Giants have depth, Isaiah Hodgins is part of that depth, that why we feel good about it. I mean, even though there's a crowded outside room with Slayton, Hyatt, and Neighbors, we feel good about the depth that's even behind them because Isaiah Hodgins is here. And, you know, he's not just this run-of-the-mill special teamer that's here. He can contribute. He contributes inside the red zone. I even think he could have a role on this team inside the red zone, again, like he had last year.
Yeah, and again, I just think it's good to have – I'd like to have just some deep depth at one spot, right? And not just immediately feel like, well, we don't need that guy. Let's move on. I would like to keep him. You know, and he was important on that 2022 team. Right, they averaged 23.2 points per game with him, and then 20.5 with him. The difference between 11th and 21st in scoring. Oh, yeah. You know, last year he had 21 catches, 230 yards, 3 touchdowns on a 63% catch rate in 17 games. The year before he had 33 catches, 351 yards, 4 touchdowns on a 78% catch rate in only 8 games. Where 2022 he was third in yards per game at 44. You know, he obviously had that 100-yard playoff game, was one of only 200-yard games that year for the Giants. And then last year was 7th in the yards per game on the team. But he still had 3 touchdowns, was third on the team after Slayton and Saquon Barkley both had 4 receiving touchdowns. He's a good, crisp route runner with, like, really good timing. Like, that's – like, he has that down. He has that down better than guys that are probably going to be starting for the Giants. You know, he's good at the stem to freeze DBs and gain separation. And he has great hands at the catch away from his body and stride, right? 1 drop in 2 years. And that's why you're talking about red zone. Like, his route running translates in the red zone. And he led the team, you know, these last 2 years with those 8 receiving touchdowns. Even when his playing time reduced, like the Patriots game, he had a touchdown in that game. The Packers game, he had a touchdown in that game, you know, from Tommy DeVito. That was with playing, you know, 25 to 35% of the snaps. He was still able to get out there on the field and be used in those spots. The thing going against Hodgins, though, is that if everyone stays healthy, there's really very, very little playing time for him. But if one guy gets hurt, if Slayton, Neighbors, or Hyatt gets hurt, then I think he's back to having the same role that he had last year, which is something I would like to keep him around for.
Yeah, and his role last year was being on the field for 46% of the snaps that he was eligible to play for. And I agree with you. If one guy goes down, I think that's where that number is going to return to. But the interesting thing about Isaiah Hodgins, Bobby, we've talked about this since the Giants have acquired him, and you know, even flirting with in 2022. Well, what is his role going to be, and how good can Isaiah Hodgins be? He's a 6'3", 200-pound wide receiver who you would look at that height and you would look at that body being like, oh, this guy could maybe catch the ball at all 3 levels of the field, and this guy can maybe challenge deeper or even go up and get some contested catches. That's just not the case with him. He's a big wide receiver whose average depth of target is the number of a slot receiver. Like if we were to remove if you were to remove Isaiah Hodgins and you remove his height and his weight from this conversation, and you just heard the way that like we're talking about him, a little bit of a red zone weapon that can get open, that is a good route runner. You're thinking that we're talking about like a slot wide receiver right
That's
now.
basically what he is, even though he lines up on the outside, obviously. And
It's
he
kind of
benefited so
backwards.
much from that year because it was a short, a low average depth of target timing offense, and that's what fits Isaiah Hodgins really well. But last year I remember at this time when people were like trying to say Hodgins was the wide receiver one, he's better than Darius Slayton, and it's like, well, he's not better than Darius Slayton. And they're going to want to play Jalen Hyatt, and that's too high. It's going to take playing time away from his Isaiah Hodgins. And we're like, what does Hodgins have to do to kind of fight off Jalen Hyatt? The thing we said was like, was he needed to become a contested catch threat to really, and I still think he needs to do that to really further his career to get playing time, down the road in the NFL, because he does have the size to do it, right? If he can do that, then he's someone who can play more than what he's slated to do on the Giants this year. But we just have never ever seen that from him. Last year they even tried in training camp, and it was really the only guy Daniel Jones didn't have a connection in last year in training camp, and this year he doesn't get any snaps with the first team. But the main thing is just the speed holds him back, right? And that's why he's a 0 to 12-yard receiver, is because he just doesn't have the speed to separate once. He doesn't have the speed to separate once he's done at the top of the route.
No, and that's why his role on this offense with a crew of very fast wide receivers in Robinson, Neighbors, Slayton, Hyatt. That's why his role is diminished, because he just doesn't have that same X factor speed.
Yeah, and again, like you mentioned, like, well, he does things that slot receivers do. Well, you have a slot. You have a
Right.
slot wide receiver in Wan'Dale Robinson. And you have Slayton, the guy who can win at all three levels. Now you have Neighbors, who's supposed to be a star wide receiver, and you have Jalen Hyatt, who can create plays down the field, and you want to get more involved. And it's going to leave Isaiah Hodgins frustrated. And if he does get cut, you understand it, because again, he played 0 special team snaps, so you're not really angry if he's losing that spot. But I just think on a 53-man roster, we're like, think of some of the names that we're going to end up keeping and end up going to be healthy scratched every single week, right? Like there's going to be healthy scratches every single week, and unless you're severely injured. Why not keep Isaiah Hodgins around as the 5th guy on the depth chart and just have a position of strength at wide receiver? That even if 2 players go down, you can at least put out guys there that you can run 3 wide receiver offenses through.
Yeah, and you never know where you could snap your finger and a guy goes down, and all right, well, Isaiah McKenzie, you're up, bud. I'd rather have a guy like Isaiah Hodgins there who we know what he's good in, and the areas in which he's good in, he's pretty decent in. Where you can't say that about most teams' number 5 wide receivers. And Bobby, even if everybody does stay healthy, which won't happen, but even if everybody does stay healthy, I'm still not surprised if we're sitting here at year's end saying Isaiah Hodgins still found a way to catch 3 touchdown passes this year, because I think he will be used in the red zone.
Yeah, I agree. So you can have like a specialized role with him, and we're not talking. He didn't regress from the 2022 season where he was 3rd on the team in yards per game, and one of the guys he was 3rd to was a guy who played 3 games in Sterling Shepard. So essentially, was 2nd on the team in yards per game. He didn't regress from that. Just the room improved, right? They added Hyatt, and now they've added Malik Neighbors. And
I also think the league figured out what the Giants were trying to do offensively with a quick game.
Fair. But if you get Malik Neighbors still out there and Isaiah Hodgins out there, it just allows more opportunities for him. So again, I would keep him despite the fact that he has played 0 special team snaps and he's 5th on the depth chart. Justin, why don't you talk to us about something?
I'll talk to you about something. Moving on from one Isaiah to the next. But before we get to the next Isaiah, we got to talk about Captain Morgan. You know what? I can envision Isaiah Hodgins and Isaiah Simmons coming together for a nice evening at Captain Morgan. Did you know that?
What about Isaiah McKenzie?
No, he's not invited. He doesn't get invited.
Too short.
He's too short. He's the Isaiah. He's a new Isaiah, so it's like, get out, man, get out, pop. Did you know that this Captain Morgan is the official spiced rum sponsor of the NFL? When things get bland, you got to try Captain Morgan Original Spiced Rum. Delicious, crisp, perfect for game day with friends, or even perfect for a nice little evening of PPPs. I hope if you're catching up on this series and you're listening right now, I appreciate you, because this is the perfect binge-worthy series for you. Spice it up with Captain Morgan. Visit CaptainMorgan.com to find Captain near you. Please drink responsibly. Captain Morgan Original Spice Rum, 35% alcohol by volume. Captain Morgan Rum Company in New York, New York. You'll be glad you did.
You'll be glad you did. Let's talk about Isaiah Simmons. And this is kind of a fun player profile to talk about because it's so specialized, so that you can find some cool stuff on him. So Isaiah Simmons, 6'4", 238 pounds, 26 years old, the 8th overall pick in the 2020 draft. And as we all remember, the debate in 2020 was, do you take offensive tackle or you take Isaiah Simmons? Talking Giants was right. And specifically, we wanted Andrew Thomas when everyone wanted the other tackles.
Well, but guess what? We got both.
It's a victory lap that I'll never stop victory lapping just because I love that player so much. But now we got both. So the Giants traded a 7th round pick for him last year around cutdown day, and they got what they wanted out of him, despite the fact that he only started one game for them. Last year he had 50 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for a loss, and an interception that was returned for a touchdown. And they brought him back on a 1-year, $2 million deal, despite the fact that the coordinator who really liked him in Wink Martindale is gone. They brought him in to play a role, and he did just that, Justin. He played 33% of the snaps. He started versus Miami with Mike McFadden out, but he didn't play more than 50% of the snaps in any game outside of that one, besides the final week of the year. And here's a stat. 80% of his snaps were on passing plays outside the Miami game. 80%, over 80.8%. So he was a passing down player, whether that was on 3rd and long, putting him in coverage, or putting him on 3rd and short or 3rd and 7, putting him on the line of scrimmage and asking him to either blitz and use his speed or drop back into coverage. He was a specialized player, but he's essentially a defensive gadget player at this point in his career, which is fine if he was on it, if not for Arizona, but for any team that brings him in now. It's a fine role for him.
Yeah, and Bobby, I would even argue that last year was his most effective year in the NFL. Now, he had
we're trying to recoup their investment of an 8th overall pick.
He had in 2022 and 22. I mean, granted, for the Cardinals, where they played him over 1,000 snaps, like you said, they took him in the first round. You said 7th overall pick, or 8th overall pick. Excuse me. For the Giants, who gave up a 7th round pick for him, I think that was a very worthy investment. I think it worked out for him. But I would even say, last year was the most effective year of his career, because even though there have been years where he's gotten 1,000 snaps or 900 snaps, and total sacks, hits, hurries, and overall pressure, Isaiah Simmons had 8 last year on 91 pass rush snaps, when in the past he's had 116 pass rush snaps. So the rate was pretty good. 7 hurries. He had 16 total stops last year, which was close to what he's done in the past, even in 2022 when he had 900 snaps. So for what his expectation is for this Giants team in 2023, he was very effective in that role.
Yeah, they knew what he was, and they deployed him as such. Right? Yeah. They didn't try and turn him into a full-time nickel or a safety or a full-time linebacker. They basically said, you don't have a position, you're a gadget player. On 3rd down, you're going to do this. On early downs, you won't be on the field that often, but you will do this. He did it well, right? When they put him on the line of scrimmage, right? And it's either go or drop back and get into a spot because the ball's going to come out quick because of the way we're lining up and these all across the line looks. No one can get to the quarterback from the corner as fast as Isaiah Simmons, right? He didn't bust because of his speed and athleticism and size. So he can get towards the quarterback while being big and do that. And this is where I thought he was the best, where he could have been the worst, because he's been a bad tackler in his career, and he didn't show very good tackle form. But on 3rd down and long, 3rd down or 12 or whatever, they put him at linebacker and basically have him drop back to the sticks And when the quarterback would inevitably probably check the ball down at 4 or 5 yards, he rallied really well to the ball. He didn't tackle with great form, but he would get to the ball carrier and at the end of the day bring them down. And he did that pretty damn consistent. I can't remember any times that struggled. The only times I remember like the Simmons struggling was I think the Eagles completed like a 3rd and 20 like over his head, but even that was barely. Like I thought he did that well. Now if you put him in the box and ask him to play linebacker on a down snap, he's going to miss tackles and it's going to look ugly. But if you're just kind of like, hey, race this guy to the sideline and make sure it doesn't get to that stick.
Oh, he's going to win.
He's going to win, and that's what he did really well for them last year.
And the only thing that I wish he did a little bit better, Bobby, I wish he had more pass rush moves or more pass rush finesse in his bag. Because
no, it's just run straight.
I'll tell you what, because it's fun. Like he can get to a spot. He's fast. He gets off the ball. But if only he added a little bit more to his bag, which I think he should. At this point in his career, like you're a positionless player, and you're going to be asked to blitz and go after the quarterback a decent amount, especially now that they've transitioned him to nickel corner in the Shane Bowen's defense. And we know the position that Shane Bowen likes to send the most on the defense outside of the front four. It is going to be that nickel corner. I almost wish that he added a little bit to his back because I think that can make him so much more of an effective player in terms of getting at negative plays. So that's the only thing I wish, because he can get in the backfield, but I almost wish he was a player that finished more often.
Yeah. So let's talk about his role this year. So it was said on Hard Knocks, he's an early down nickel and third down money backer, which is the same position he played for Wink Martindale on the third down role. So third down, I think, is going to be the exact same. I don't think there's going to be anything different. I just think the only difference will be there's less of those cover zero looks, right? But I even think that Bowen has shown a little bit in camp that they might do a little more of that than we expect. But it's camp, and sometimes that shit doesn't translate. The difference is, do we even think he really gets on the field on early downs? Like, I understand that's like his position right now is nickel corner, and that's the position he practices with. But I just don't know if he's going to get on the field to be that role. But if he does, I think it's basically versus 12 personnel. You put him down as like a big nickel, and you play the run, and if it's pass, you play the flats, and it's a very simple assignment. Because I don't see them asking him to do much more than that on early downs.
He was on the field for 33% of the snaps last year, Bobby. I think it could be around the same this year.
Which I think would be, but I think it's similar because he didn't play very many early downs for Wink Martindale. Like again, he played one game where he played 100% of the snaps versus Miami because Mike McFadden was injured. So in a sense, he played. Let me do some quick math on this podcast.
Would you bring it down to 25%, where it's 1 out of every 4 plays he's on the field?
Yeah, I don't think it brings it back to 25%, but it was basically he was on the and he's still like because Mike McFadden, as much as we were excited about his year last year, he's not a good coverage player on third down. So he's still going to get those reps. So he played 377 snaps last year. 377 minus, come on, load for me, Johnny. Load for me, Johnny. He played how many snaps versus Miami? 54 minus 54 divided by 16. He played 20 snaps a game. So you're thinking like there's 12 to 15 third downs in every game. And then
if there's 65,
2-minute drill, you're putting them out
game
there and shit like that. So, or when teams are in passing situations. So like that's I mean, you look at it, right? That's basically what he got is like 15 to 20 plays every single game.
My guess this year is still this year is 33% of the snaps.
Yeah, I think it's extremely similar to last year. So if he starts a game like he did last year, then 33%. If he doesn't, it's going to be 20 snaps per game, whatever percentage wise that ends up being. So, all right, anything else on Isaiah Simmons?
No, like the player. And what's his contract look like? 1 year?
1 year, $2 million. So they actually gave him some real money, and they would have a good amount of dead cap if they cut him. So they do have a plan for him. I just don't think the plan is as big as people want it to be for Isaiah Simmons because there's still let's bring
Hodgins back into this too because we didn't talk about this with him. Isaiah Hodgins and Isaiah Simmons, are they Giants in 2025?
Simmons, yes. Hodgins, no.
I think they're both a no next year. I think this is it.
I just think he might just end up playing out these 1-year deals every single year with the Giants. I think unless they get two just stud coverage linebackers, I think there's a role for him on this team. So, and there
Okay.
wasn't a market. He went out there and didn't get a market for him this year, and the Giants ended up
Sure.
bringing him back late. So, all right,
Sure.
that's an episode. We will see you on the next one. Until then, let's go Big Blue.